It was dark, so dark that little Emma could barely see her own hands shaking on the phone screen. She typed the only words her brain could form. "They're fighting my mama, the bad men with the red eyes, the cleaners." Ray froze the moment he read those words. In 20 years of running the Golden Wolf crime family, he had received thousands of messages, threats, deals, lies, betrayals, but this one was different. This was a little child, so scared that she could barely spell the words right, typing on a phone too small for her trembling fingers. Then another message came through. "I'm hiding. He said he will kill her." Ray typed back 3 words. His hands, the same hands that had signed death warrants without ever shaking, were completely still. "I'm on my way." He stood up so fast that the poker chips went flying. $50 million was sitting right there in the middle of the table. He didn't even look at it. His men stared at him, confused, frozen. Nobody moved. He didn't explain. He couldn't. Because somewhere in this city, a little girl was watching her mom bleed out on the floor. And the only hope that little girl had was an old dead man's promise, and a crime boss who had spent 20 years trying to forget how to feel anything except rage. His car flew through the rain, slicked streets, when the next message lit up his phone. "I hear footsteps. Please hurry." His knuckles went white on the steering wheel. The phone said 12 minutes away. 12 minutes to a broken-down old building on the dead edge of the city. 12 minutes for a little kid who might not even have 12 seconds left. 25 years earlier, Ray wasn't Ray at all. He was a 17-year-old kid named Sam Kim, crammed into a tiny apartment with his little sister Mia and their mom, who worked 16 hours every single day at a factory just to keep food on the table. Mia was 9 years old. She had eyes that sparkled like sunlight on water, and a laugh that could chase every dark thing out of any room she walked into. She believed with her whole entire heart that her big brother could fix anything, solve any problem, chase away any nightmare that crept into their little bedroom on cold nights. Sam had been working late at an underground garage, his hands covered in engine grease when the call came. The factory owner's son, drunk and stupid and entitled, had started a fight with one of the workers. Shots were fired. The bullets didn't care about innocence. They didn't care about dreams. They didn't care about little girls who were just waiting for their big brother to come home and help with math homework. Mia died in Sam's arms in a hospital that smelled like cleaning liquid and broken promises. She had held his hand, her grip getting weaker with every shallow breath, and she had whispered words that would never, ever leave him. "Big brother, promise me you'll help other kids when they're scared." He promised. It was the last thing she ever said to him. After the funeral, something deep inside Sam just broke apart and died. The part of him that believed in justice, in the system, in the idea that good people could live safe lives. All of it died with his sister. The police couldn't protect his family. The law couldn't save Mia. The system had failed every single person he loved. So Sam decided to become the system himself. He started with the man who pulled the trigger, the factory owner's son, who had bought his freedom with family money and family connections. Sam found him 3 months later, drunk and laughing about the whole thing like it was just a funny story. The body was never found, neither was Sam Kim. What came out the other side was something colder, harder, more calculating. He learned how power really worked in the shadows of the city, who controlled what, where the real decisions got made. Within 5 years, he had gone from a grieving brother to a feared enforcer. Within 10 years, he controlled 3 entire districts. Within 15 years, he owned half the city's criminal underworld. And somewhere along the way, Sam Kim completely disappeared. What was left standing was Ray, a man who had built walls around his heart so thick that nothing in this world could get through them. A man who had convinced himself that caring about anyone was a luxury he simply could not afford, until tonight. The phone announced 5 minutes to the destination. Another message came through. The words could barely hold together. "I think I'm going to sleep now. I'm really tired." That hit him like a physical punch straight to the chest. He recognized that tone immediately. He had heard it before, in Mia's voice during those final hours in that hospital. It was the sound of someone giving up, A child's body shutting itself down from too much fear, too much blood, too much of everything. "No," he said out loud to his empty car, his voice rough with something he thought he had killed off years ago. "Not tonight, not again." He grabbed his phone and typed fast, steering with one hand. "Stay awake, talk to me." "What's your name?" The answer came back slow. Each letter must have taken everything she had. "Emma, I'm Emma." "Emma, my name is Ray. I'm almost there. You need to stay awake for me. Can you do that? I'll try, good girl." "Tell me about your mama. What's her name?" Diane Brooks. "She makes things, big metal things that move." "She's really strong." Something cracked open inside Ray's chest. This little girl, hiding in pure terror while her mama fought for both their lives, was talking about strength in creation. She was talking about the kind of normal, beautiful, ordinary life that man never got to finish living. The phone announced 1 minute to destination. Ray could see it now, not a house. A massive old industrial building that had once been a slaughterhouse. It loomed against the night sky like a sleeping giant, all rusted metal and broken windows and shadows that seemed to breathe. He parked 2 blocks away and studied the scene carefully. No police cars, no ambulance, no neighbors peeking through windows. Whatever was happening inside that building, it was happening in complete, perfect isolation. Emma and her mama were facing this nightmare entirely alone. Until now, Ray checked his weapon and stepped out into the rain. The water soaked through his expensive suit within seconds. He didn't care. He moved through the shadows like smoke, every sense sharp, every instinct screaming that this was no simple situation. This was a professional hit. As he got closer to the building, he heard it, the whine of industrial machinery, the sharp crack of something breaking, and underneath all of it, a sound that turned his blood ice cold. Gunfire, not the panicked spray of someone who didn't know what they were doing. The controlled, deliberate bursts of trained killers. Ray scaled the fire escape without making a sound, his dress shoes finding grip on wet metal. From the roof, he could see through a grimy skylight down into the main workshop floor below. What he saw made him go completely still, his breath caught in his throat. He had come here expecting to find a terrified victim. What he found instead was a woman at war. Diane Brooks was not crying. She was not screaming. She was not doing any of the things that terror was supposed to make a person do. She was welding. The workshop smelled like electricity in the air and burning metal, and something else underneath it all. That sharp, copper smell of blood that Diane was working very hard not to think about. Her hands were completely steady as she dragged the electrode across the steel door, sealing it shut with a line of molten metal that glowed like a promise in the dark. Behind her welding mask, sweat poured down her neck and soaked into her shirt. Her arms ached from holding the torch, from the weight of keeping herself together when everything inside her was screaming to fall apart. "Mama," said a small, terrified voice from behind her, Lily's voice, but Diane could not turn around. Not yet, not until the seal was finished. Into the vent, baby. Diane's voice was calm, controlled, nothing like the storm raging inside her chest. "Do not come out until the silence is really, truly heavy. Do you understand me?" "But Mama," Lily said. Diane finished the weld and finally turned, lifting her mask. Her daughter stood there in her purple pajamas, holding the stuffed bear that Marcus had given her 3 years ago, her dark eyes wide and full of fear. Diane crossed the workshop in 3 big steps and knelt down, gripping Lily's small shoulders. "Listen to me. You are stronger than you think you are. Your daddy taught you how to be brave, and I need you to be brave right now. Can you do that for me?" Lily nodded. Tears were streaming down her little face. Diane kissed her forehead, tasting salt and fear and love, so fierce it physically hurt. "Good girl, now go. And remember, if the door opens before I come get you yourself, you drop the counterweight just like we practiced." Lily scrambled toward the ventilation shaft, still clutching her bear. Diane watched until her daughter disappeared into the darkness. Then she turned back to face the door she had just sealed. The banging had stopped. That was worse than the noise. Diane had built this workshop with her own 2 hands over the past 2 years. After Marcus died, After the life insurance money came through, she had bought this old, broken-down building and transformed it into something beautiful. Her kinetic sculptures, massive moving pieces of industrial art, stood all throughout the space like sleeping giants. She had built them to express grief, to channel rage, to create something beautiful out of the violence that had taken her husband. She had never once imagined they would become weapons. The thermal drill started up outside, its high, pitched whine cut clean through the silence. They were cutting through her reinforced door. Diane looked over at the control panel on the far wall, the one that operated the crusher, her largest piece. A hydraulic press disguised as abstract art, designed to slowly compress and reshape massive steel beams in a meditation on pressure and transformation. Tonight, it would serve a very different purpose. Diane moved through the workshop like a shadow, her work boots completely silent on the concrete floor. She climbed the catwalk that ran along the ceiling and positioned herself behind a support beam with a clear view of the door. In her hand, she held a modified nail gun, 300 pounds of pressure behind every single cinch spike. Marcus had taught her to shoot back when they first got married, back when he still worked legitimate construction jobs, and neither of them knew yet that his bosses were monsters. She wished he was here. God, she wished Marcus was standing right here beside her, telling her what to do, how to protect their daughter from whatever was coming through that door. But Marcus was dead and Diane was alone. The door exploded inward in a shower of sparks and molten metal. 3 men in full tactical gear poured through. Night vision goggles glowing red in the darkness, the cleaners. Diane had heard Marcus mention them exactly once. In a nightmare where he had screamed himself awake and then refused to tell her what he had seen. Now she understood. The first man through the door stepped directly into the kill zone. Diane hit the control switch. The crusher activated with a hydraulic hiss that sounded exactly like a dragon waking up. The massive press descended from the ceiling. 2 full tons of industrial steel, moving with this deceptive, almost lazy grace. The man looked up just in time to see his own death falling toward him. The sound was wet and final. His companions froze. Their weapons swept the darkness as they tried to locate the threat. Diane used their split second of hesitation to fire the nail gun. The spike caught one man directly in the shoulder and spun him hard into a support column. He went down fast, screaming through his helmet. 2 down, but there were more coming. She could hear them outside, repositioning, calling to each other in clipped military language that made her blood go cold. She reloaded the nail gun with shaking hands. Her shoulder throbbed where she had taken a graze during the first assault, before she had managed to seal herself and Lily inside. The wound was not deep, but it was bleeding steadily, soaking through her shirt, making her movements slower and clumsier than she needed them to be. She needed help, she needed backup, she needed... A figure dropped through the skylight above, landing in a crouch that barely made any sound at all. Diane's heart stopped. She swung the nail gun straight at the new threat, her finger tightening on the trigger. Then she saw him. The man was wearing an expensive suit that was completely wrong for a combat situation. His dark hair was soaked from rain and plastered against a face that belonged in a boardroom or a magazine, not in the middle of a war zone. But it was his eyes that made Diane hesitate, dark, calculating, completely and terrifyingly calm, and on his wrist, just barely visible under his sleeve, was a tattoo she had seen before. A golden wolf with sapphire eyes. The same golden wolf she had found drawn in Marcus's secret journals after his funeral. The mark of the monsters who took him. Rage exploded through Diane's chest, hot and blinding and absolute. She didn't think, she just moved. She dropped from the catwalk and charged straight across the workshop floor. The nail gun clattered to the concrete as she grabbed a heavy wrench from her workbench and swung it at the man's head with every bit of strength in her entire body. He caught her wrist mid. Swing, the world stopped. Ray had come prepared for many things. Armed resistance. Defensive structures. Maybe even explosive traps. What he was not prepared for was this woman currently trying to take his head off with a wrench that had to weigh 15 pounds. She was magnificent, not beautiful in the delicate, fragile way people usually meant when they used that word. Diane Brooks was beautiful the way a storm was beautiful, the way a wildfire was beautiful, dangerous and untamed and absolutely lethal. Her dark skin gleamed with sweat in the emergency lighting. Her natural hair was pulled back in a bun that was coming completely undone. Her arms were corded with real muscle that spoke of years and years of wielding industrial tools. And her eyes, God, her eyes, they were molten with pure hatred as she stared at his tattoo. You killed him. Her voice was raw and broken. Fury and grief twisted together into something sharp enough to cut right through bone. You killed Marcus. Ray held her wrist, feeling her pulse hammering hard against his fingers. She was strong, stronger than he had expected. The wrench trembled in the air between them, both of them locked in this contest of pure physical will. I didn't kill him, Ray said. His voice was low and controlled, even though his heart was racing hard inside his chest. I'm the one he called. Liar. Diane tried to wrench herself free, but Ray was faster. He twisted, using her own momentum against her, and suddenly they were pressed together. Her back against his chest, his arm wrapped around her waist, pinning her arms to her sides. She was breathing hard, her whole body tense as a pulled wire. This close he could smell her, machine oil and electricity in the air, and underneath all of it something warmer. Fear and determination and pure, stubborn life. His mouth was near her ear, close enough that his breath stirred the small hairs at her temple. Listen to me, he growled, his voice rough. The men outside are the cleaners. They do not stop until everyone in the building is dead. Your daughter is in danger. You can hate me all you want, later, but right now, I'm the only thing standing between Lily and a bullet. Diane went completely and absolutely still. How do you know her name? Because she texted me for help. Before Diane could say another word, a small voice called out from the ventilation shaft. Uncle Ray. Ray felt Diane's entire body go rigid. He loosened his grip and let her turn around in his arms. They were still close enough that he could have counted the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. Could see the confusion slowly replacing the rage. Lily crawled out from the vent, still clutching her stuffed bear. She was tiny, fragile, looking in her purple pajamas, but her eyes were sharp and completely clear as she looked up at Ray. Daddy said Uncle Ray fixes the monsters, Lily said, holding up her phone. It was in my bear. He said it only calls one number. For emergencies. Diane stared at her daughter, then at Ray, then at the old beat-up phone in Lily's small hand. Understanding crashed through her like a massive wave. Marcus had left a fail, safe behind, a dead man's final plan. And it led to this man, this crime boss, this killer. Who are you? Diane's voice was barely a whisper. Ray Kim, I was your husband's friend. Marcus didn't have friends in the Golden Wolf family. He had one. Ray's jaw tightened, and I owe him a debt I can never fully repay. The moment shattered as gunfire erupted outside. The remaining cleaners had regrouped. Now they were coming in force. Ray heard the distinctive crack of a flashbang grenade hitting the concrete floor. He moved on pure instinct, pulling both Diane and Lily down behind a steel workbench as the world exploded into white light and deafening noise. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard men shouting, boots on concrete, the mechanical click of weapons being readied. Ray met Diane's eyes. They were inches apart, their bodies tangled together in the tight space, Lily pressed between them. In that moment, he watched her make a decision, not to trust him, not yet, but to use him. There's an exit through my garage, she said, her lips close to his ear so he could hear her over the chaos. But we have to cross the main floor. How many? At least 6, maybe more. Ray did the math fast in his head. 6 trained killers against 1 crime boss and a sculptor with a 7. You're old to protect. The odds were absolutely terrible. He smiled. I've faced worse. Diane stared at him like he was completely out of his mind. Maybe he was. But when he looked at Lily, this brave little girl who had reached out to a total stranger in her darkest moment, he saw Mia. And he knew with complete certainty that he would burn this entire building to the ground before he let history repeat itself. Trust me or die here, Ray said, pulling his weapon. Choose. Diane grabbed a welding torch from the workbench and ignited it with a hiss of blue flame. I don't trust you, but I'll fight beside you. It wasn't trust, but for right now it was enough. They moved as one, exploding from cover as the cleaners advanced. Ray's first 3 shots were perfectly placed: chest, throat, forehead. Each man went down without a single sound. Diane swung the welding torch like a sword. The superheated flame caught one hired gun across the face. His screams echoed through the warehouse as he stumbled backward directly into the path of the crusher. Diane hit the reverse switch, dragging the massive steel head upward. Then she slammed it back down. The hydraulic press descended with that same dragon hiss. The screaming stopped. They fought like dancers in some violent, terrible ballet. Ray with lethal precision, Diane with raw, industrial fury. She knew this space completely, knew which shadows to use, which pieces of machinery could become a weapon. When 2 cleaners cornered them near the steel beam storage, Diane released the magnetic clamps, holding a suspended beam in place. It swung like a massive pendulum, crushing one man against the wall and sending the other sprawling. Ray finished him with a single shot. The silence that followed was deafening. 8 bodies, no survivors. Diane stood in the center of her workshop, chest heaving, the welding torch still burning in her hand. Her shirt was soaked through with blood, hers and theirs both, and her eyes were wild. She looked like a goddess of war. Terrible and beautiful and utterly unbreakable. Ray could not look away. We need to move, he said, his voice rougher than he intended. There will be more coming. Diane nodded. She extinguished the torch and crossed to where Lily had hidden herself again during the fight. She pulled her daughter out and held her close. We're going to the garage, baby. Stay right next to Mama. They ran through the workshop, weaving between sculptures and machinery. Ray covered their back, his weapon trained on the entrance. They burst through a side door into a converted garage space where an old armored bank truck sat like a sleeping elephant. You restore these? Ray asked, genuinely impressed despite the situation. I rebuild things, Diane said simply. She yanked open the driver's door, get in, but when she turned the key, nothing happened. The engine clicked, struggled, then died. No, Diane's voice cracked. No, no, no. Not now. Ray moved to the hood and popped it open. The starters shot. I can hotwire it, but I can't reach the wiring from here. Your hands are too big. Diane was already looking at the dashboard. At the tiny space underneath where the wiring lived, they both turned and looked at Lily at exactly the same time. The little girl stared back at them, understanding dawning slowly in her young eyes. Like the go-kart you built me, Lily said quietly. Diane's hands were shaking. Yes, baby, exactly like that. Lily didn't hesitate. She crawled under the dashboard, with her stuffed bear still clutched in one hand. Ray watched in complete amazement as she pulled a hairpin from her pocket, the same kind Mia used to wear, and began working on the wiring with steady, practiced movements. Who are you people? He murmured under his breath. We're survivors, Diane said simply. Her eyes never left her daughter. We're the ones who don't give up. The engine roared to life. Lily emerged from under the dashboard, grease on her face, grinning from ear to ear. I fixed it, Mama. Diane pulled her daughter into a fierce, fierce hug, pressing kisses all over her forehead. That's my girl. That's my brilliant, brave girl. Ray climbed into the passenger seat as Diane gunned the engine. Where are we going? Somewhere they won't think to look. Diane's hands were white, knuckle tight on the steering wheel. Somewhere I built. They crashed through the garage door in an explosion of splintering wood and corrugated metal. The armored truck hit the street with its tires screaming as Diane whipped it around and floored it into the night. Behind them, the workshop exploded into flames. Someone had triggered an incendiary device. Ray watched in the side mirror as Diane's fortress, her sanctuary, the place where she had poured 2 years of her life, went up in orange and gold. Her face was stone. She did not look back. In the back seat, Lily whispered, Mama, are we going to be okay? Diane met her daughter's eyes in the rearview mirror. Yes, baby, we're going to be okay. But Ray was watching the sky. where a small drone was pacing them, 3 blocks back. Its red light blinking in the darkness like a mean, evil eye. They were not safe yet, not even close. The drone stayed with them for 6 straight blocks before Ray made his move. Take the next left. I'm routing us into Sector 4. I have a sharpshooter on the roof of the textile plant. Get us in his line of sight. Fast. Diane didn't question him. She yanked the wheel hard. The truck's tires screamed as it came flying around the corner into a narrow alley. The drone followed. It adjusted its altitude to clear the buildings. Again, right, then left. Diane obeyed, weaving through the industrial district's maze of warehouses and loading docks. But the drone matched every single turn, its camera tracking them with machine-like precision. It's not losing us, Diane said through gritted teeth. I know, Ray was texting rapidly on his phone. I'm calling in a favor. When I say now, kill the lights and take the tunnel entrance on your right. What tunnel? The one you built for the city's water project 3 years ago. Diane's head snapped toward him. Her eyes went wide. How do you know about that? Because your husband told me. He said you were the best structural engineer he had ever met in his life. Even without the degree to prove it. Ray's phone buzzed. He smiled. It was a dangerous, predatory smile. Now, Diane killed the lights and wrenched the wheel right. The truck plunged down a concrete ramp that most people would have completely missed, into the mouth of a storm drain tunnel wide enough for maintenance vehicles. The darkness swallowed them whole. Behind them, the drone hovered at the tunnel entrance, its sensors struggling with the sudden absence of anything to track. Then a flash of light, a rifle shot from a nearby rooftop. The drone exploded in a shower of sparks and burning plastic. One of Ray's people, right on time, they drove through the tunnels in silence, the truck's headlights carving a path through the dripping dark. The walls were covered in Diane's own markers, coded symbols showing water pressure, structural strength, maintenance schedules. She navigated entirely from memory, taking turns that seemed completely random but clearly weren't. In the back seat, Lily had fallen into an exhausted, deep sleep, still clutching her bear. You know this city's bones, Ray said quietly. I built half of them. Diane's voice was hollow. The bridges, the underpasses, the foundation reinforcements for the new district buildings. I was the welder on every major project for 5 years. Marcus got me the jobs through his union connections. The jobs that were fronts for the crime family. She paused. I didn't know that then. I thought I was just helping build the city. I thought Marcus was just a good union man with good connections. I didn't know he was working for the Golden Wolf family. I didn't know any of it until the night he came home, bleeding and terrified, telling me we had to run. What stopped you? He wouldn't tell me why. He said knowing would put Lily and me in danger. Diane's voice cracked. 2 days later, he was dead. Car accident, they said. Lost control on a bridge I had helped reinforce. The irony was not lost on me. Ray was quiet for a long moment. It wasn't an accident. I know that now. Diane's eyes shone with unshed tears in the dashboard lights. I've known for a while, but everyone told me I was paranoid. That grief was making me see things that weren't there. So I stopped asking questions. I built my workshop. Created my art, raised my daughter. I tried to forget. Someone didn't want you to forget. The city developer. Diane spat the title like it tasted rotten. Daniel Cross. He has been buying up the entire industrial district, tearing down the old buildings to make room for luxury apartments. His shell companies kept trying to buy my building through a blind trust for 6 months straight. He didn't know it was me until his men broke in last week and found the deed. And he sent the cleaners. He sent them because I know where the bodies are buried. Literally. Diane took a sharp turn, the truck tilting dangerously before righting itself. I welded the smuggling compartments into the bridge supports, the hidden rooms in the building foundations. I documented everything because I am meticulous, because I am an engineer at heart, even without the paper to prove it. Those documents show which buildings are structurally unsafe, which foundations were built with cheap, inferior materials while the developer pocketed the money he saved. Ray leaned forward. Understanding was dawning fast. How many buildings? 15 high rises, all of them. If the truth came out, Cross would go to prison for manslaughter. Hundreds of people are living in death traps right now because this man wanted to maximize his profit. Where are the documents? Diane smiled, and it was the saddest smile Ray had ever seen on another human being. That is the problem. They're not in documents anymore. She pulled the truck into a wider chamber, an old maintenance station that had been converted into a makeshift garage. The space was dry and lit by emergency lighting running on a backup generator. Along the walls were shelves stocked full of supplies. Water, food, medical kits, tools. Marcus built this, Diane said, shutting off the engine, after he started getting nervous. Before he died, he called it the panic room. I've maintained it ever since. Restocked it every few months. I never actually thought I would need it. They climbed out of the truck. Ray carried Lily, who was still asleep, and laid her gently down on a small cot in the corner. Diane covered her with a blanket and smoothed her daughter's hair with infinite, heartbreaking tenderness. The documents, Ray prompted quietly. Diane straightened and met his eyes. I made sure no one could ever find them. 2 years ago, after the third break-in at my workshop, I realized hiding them in a safe wasn't good enough anymore. I realized that as long as those papers existed, we would never truly be safe. Then why are they still hunting you? Because Cross doesn't know I destroyed them, and because Diane hesitated. Then she reached for the hem of her shirt. Ray's breath caught as she turned, lifting the fabric to expose her back. Her skin was a map of scars. Raised, puckered tissue that formed patterns across her shoulder blades and down her spine. At first they looked random, like the aftermath of some terrible accident with hot metal. But as Ray stepped closer, studying them carefully in the harsh light, he saw the truth. They weren't random. They were precise, deliberate. A topographical map, he breathed. Every tunnel, every hidden room, every structural flaw. Diane's voice was steady, but Ray could hear the tremor running just underneath it. I encoded it using a system Marcus and I developed together. Thermal scarification done in stages over 6 months. It hurt like nothing I can describe, but it was the only way I could think of to keep the information truly safe. Ray reached out, his fingers hovering just above her skin. May I? Diane nodded. Her breath hitched slightly as his fingertips made contact. His hands were rough and calloused from a lifetime of violence, but his touch was surprisingly, unexpectedly gentle as he traced the raised lines of scar tissue. Each ridge and valley was a street, a building, a secret. You turned yourself into the key, he murmured. I turned myself into a target. Diane shivered, though whether from cold or from his touch, Ray couldn't tell. If Cross gets his hands on me, he can photograph the scars and decode them. He'll know exactly which buildings to demolish before anyone can investigate. He'll destroy the evidence and then kill Lily and me to tie up every loose end. Ray's fingers paused over a particularly intricate pattern between her shoulder blades. Unless we use it against him, Diane turned. Suddenly they were face to face, close enough that Ray could see the exhaustion and fear and desperate hope warring in her expression. What are you suggesting? We give him what he wants. Ray's voice dropped low and dangerous. We give him the map. But we choose where he looks. Understanding lit up Diane's eyes. A trap, a tomb, Ray said, and he smiled. The smile of a predator who has finally found exactly what he was looking for. You built this city's skeleton. Now we use it to bury him. They planned until dawn, mapping out a strategy together. Diane spread out hand, drawn blueprints across the maintenance station table, while Ray made calls to his network, pulling together the pieces they would need. Lily woke up around 5 in the morning, surprisingly alert for a child who had just survived an assassination attempt. She sat cross-legged on the cot, eating crackers from the emergency supplies and watching the adults work with serious, solemn eyes. Is Daddy really alive? She asked suddenly. The room went completely silent. Diane looked at Ray with something desperate in her gaze. Ray knelt beside the cot and met Lily's eyes at her level. Yes, he said. Where is he? Somewhere safe. Somewhere the bad men cannot find him. Why can't we go there? because right now, the safest thing for your father is if people believe he is already gone." Ray chose his words carefully. "But when this is all over, when the bad men are gone for good, you will see him again." Lily considered this with the grave seriousness of a child who had been forced to grow up much too fast. "Okay, then let's make the bad men go away." Diane made a sound that was half laugh and half sob. She pulled her daughter close and buried her face in Lily's hair. Ray stood and gave them some privacy, but his mind was already racing ahead to what came next. They had a plan, but it required perfect timing and a level of trust that he knew Diane did not have yet. He had seen the way she looked at him. Like he was a necessary evil, a weapon to be picked up, used, then put back down. He couldn't blame her. "We need to move soon," he said quietly. "Cross will have people checking every property you've ever been associated with. This tunnel system buys us time, but not much." Diane nodded and released Lily. "There's a maintenance exit that surfaces in the old industrial park. We can take the truck most of the way, and then we walk into the glass tower." Diane's voice was completely steady. "Cross's flagship building, the one that's supposed to open next month. The one I know is not structurally safe, because I was the engineer who found the problems and reported them right before I was mysteriously fired and replaced. He'll be expecting you. I'm counting on it." Diane moved to a duffel bag in the corner and unzipped it to reveal tools, equipment, and something that made Ray raise one eyebrow. A small remote control unit. "I've been preparing for this for 2 years, Diane said. "Ever since I figured out that Marcus's death was not an accident." "What is that? Insurance?" Diane's smile was sharp as a blade. "When Cross fired me from the glass tower project, I left a few surprises in the hydraulic systems. Safety features, I called them. Emergency measures that would prevent catastrophic failure. But they're not safety features." "No," Diane's eyes gleamed. "They're triggers, the emergency fire shutters, the water suppression system, the elevator controls. I can override all of them from right here with this remote." Cross wanted to cut corners on materials. "I made sure those corners would cut right back." Ray stared at her with a mixture of admiration and something deeper, something that felt genuinely dangerous. She was not just a victim fighting back. She was a strategist, a warrior, a woman who had taken her grief and her rage and turned them both into precision instruments. She was magnificent. Diane hesitated, then reached back into the duffel bag and pulled out a worn, stained notebook. "The scars are real, Ray, but the map on my back is a decoy. The real data is right here. We are going to use his own greed against him. There's one more thing." Diane's voice dropped. "Cross will want proof that I'm giving him the real map. He'll want to see my scars, photograph them, maybe even," she swallowed hard, "he'll want to hurt me. To make absolutely sure I'm not holding anything back. That is not going to happen. It has to look real." Diane met his eyes. "If he suspects a trap, he'll kill us all. We need him confident, greedy, thinking he's already won. And you want me to let him hurt you. I want you to let him think he can." The silence stretched out between them, heavy with everything left unsaid. "Finally," Ray nodded. "I'll stay close. The moment he crosses the line, I move." "No." Diane's voice was firm. "You wait until I give the signal, until Lily is safe, and Cross has revealed where he is keeping the evidence against himself. We do this right, or we do not do it at all." Ray wanted to argue, but he understood. She was not just fighting to survive. She was fighting for vindication, for justice, for the truth about what happened to her husband. She needed to see this through to the very end. "All right," he said finally. "We do it your way." They spent the next hour getting ready. Diane changed into clean clothes from her emergency supplies. Dark pants, a black tank top that showed the scars on her arms and shoulders, work boots that had seen years of hard use. She looked exactly like what she was, a working woman who had built every single piece of her strength through labor and loss. Ray made more calls, coordinating with his people. They would need extraction, backup, and a cleanup crew. The Golden Wolf family would be earning their reputation tonight. As they loaded back into the truck, Diane hesitated. "Why are you doing this?" The real reason. Ray looked at Lily, sleeping again in the back seat. Then at Diane. 25 years ago, I had a little sister," he said. "She was 9 years old. She died because I wasn't there when she needed me." "And you think saving us will make up for that?" "No." Ray's voice was rough. "Nothing will ever make up for that. But maybe, just maybe, I can make sure another little girl doesn't have to grow up without her family." Diane studied him for a long moment. He watched something shift in her expression. Not quite trust, but understanding, recognition. "You loved her," Diane said softly. "Your sister, more than anything. Then I guess we're both out here fighting for ghosts." They drove in silence through the tunnels and surfaced in the pre-dawn darkness of the industrial park. The glass tower loomed in the distance, its framework of steel and glass catching the very first rays of sunlight. It looked beautiful, modern, full of promise. It looked like a lie. Diane stared at it, her jaw tight. "That building is going to come down one way or another. Then let's make sure we're not inside it when it does," Ray said. They approached the glass tower just as the city was beginning to wake up. Construction crews arriving. Security guards changing shifts. To any casual observer, they looked like just another contractor and consultant showing up for an early morning meeting. But Ray's hand never left the weapon concealed under his jacket, and Diane's fingers stayed close to the remote in her pocket. They walked through the main entrance, past the expensive marble and designer furniture, into the elevator that would carry them up to the penthouse level where Daniel Cross ran his business. As the elevator climbed, Diane reached out and took Ray's hand. Her palm was calloused, scarred, strong. "Whatever happens up there, nothing's going to happen," Ray interrupted. "We walk out together, all three of us." "You can't promise that. Watch me." The elevator doors opened onto a scene of casual, obscene luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. Art that screamed money. Furniture that whispered power. And standing by the windows, flanked by 4 men in full tactical gear, was Daniel Cross. He turned as they entered, a wide smile spreading across his handsome face. "Miss Brooks, I was beginning to think you weren't going to accept my invitation." "I didn't have much choice," Diane said coldly. "No, I suppose you didn't." Cross's eyes slid over to Ray. Recognition dawned slowly. Ray Kim, the boss himself. "I'm honored you won't be," Ray said, confident. "I like that." Cross gestured to his guards. "But you are outnumbered and outgunned. So perhaps we should all be civil." His gaze returned to Diane. "You have something I want. I have something you want. Let's make a trade. What could you possibly have that I want?" Diane said. Cross snapped his fingers. A door opened and a woman walked in. Mrs. Henderson, the sweet old neighbor, the trusted babysitter. The woman who had watched Lily 100 times while Diane worked late in her workshop. The woman who had betrayed them. Diane's hand flew to her pocket, to the remote, but Cross was faster. "My driver just sent word that he has secured the package," Cross said pleasantly, gesturing to the old woman. "And Mrs. Henderson here has kindly provided a list of Lily's fears, should she prove uncooperative." The room tilted. Diane's vision went red at the edges. Ray moved slightly, putting himself between her and the guards, but his face was completely expressionless. "What do you want?" Diane's voice was pure ice and murder. "The map," Cross smiled. "Every tunnel, every flaw, every secret you burned into your own skin. I want photographs. Measurements, everything, and then I want you to disappear. Permanently." Diane looked at Ray. He gave the slightest nod. "Fine," she said, reaching for the hem of her shirt. "But first, you are going to tell me where you are keeping the original construction documents. The ones that prove you killed my husband to cover up your crimes." Cross laughed. "Why would I tell you that?" Diane smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Ray had ever seen on another human being. "Because," she said sweetly, "you're standing on the wrong pillar." And then all of hell broke loose. Diane's thumb pressed down on the remote button with the same calm, steady precision she used to strike an arc weld. The hydraulic system she had sabotaged 2 years ago, the one that controlled the emergency fire shutters on the penthouse level, engaged with a sound like thunder rolling through steel veins. The shutters didn't just descend, they guillotined. 2 tons of reinforced steel slammed down across the elevator banks, the stairwell access, every single exit that Cross had positioned his men near. The sound was catastrophic, metal screaming against metal, concrete cracking, glass exploding outward in a shower of glittering fragments. One of the guards was caught beneath a shutter near the east wall. The sound he made lasted less than 1 second. Ray moved through the chaos like smoke. His weapon was already drawn, already firing, 2 shots, chest and throat. The guard nearest to them crumpled to the floor. Another guard raised his rifle, but Diane was faster. She grabbed a steel sample beam from Cross's pretentious desk display and swung it like a baseball bat. The impact against the man's skull was wet and final. Cross stumbled backward, his expensive shoes slipping on marble that was now covered in dust and blood. "Lily is 3 blocks away in your black sedan," Ray interrupted, his voice colder than winter steel. "The one your driver parked in the underground garage. The same driver who has been on my payroll for the last 6 months." Understanding and terror fought for control of Cross's face. Mrs. Henderson tried to run for the one exit still remaining, the service corridor. But Diane was already there, blocking her path with nothing but presence and absolute rage. "You watched her," Diane said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You held my daughter, you sang her to sleep, and you sold us." "They threatened my pension, Mrs." Henderson stammered. Diane's fist connected with the woman's jaw with the full force of years, spent wielding 20-pound hammers. Mrs. Henderson went down hard. "Your pension," Diane repeated flatly. Then she turned back to Cross. The developer was trapped between both of them now. Ray blocking one side, Diane blocking the other. His remaining guards were either dead or locked behind the shutters, their muffled shouting barely audible through the reinforced steel. "The documents," Diane said. "The ones proving you killed Marcus, where are they?" Cross laughed. It was desperate and ragged. "You think I'd keep evidence of murder in my own office. I'm not stupid, no, but you're sentimental." Ray holstered his weapon and pulled out his phone, tapping it twice. A projection appeared on the nearest wall. Security footage from Cross's private home. You kept them in your grandfather's old safe, the one you had installed in your bedroom behind the painting. Cross's face went completely pale. "You're wondering how I know that." Ray's voice was conversational, even as violence soaked every inch of the air around them. "Your decorator, your security consultant, your interior designer, they all work for me. You've been building your empire on my foundation, Daniel. You just didn't know it. This is insane." Cross was shaking now. "The police will. The police will find a corrupt developer who died in a tragic construction accident." Diane interrupted. "They will find evidence of bribery, fraud, conspiracy to commit murder. They will find documentation showing you ordered the death of a union worker who discovered your cost cutting. And they will find a little girl's testimony about the night men came to kill her mother." She stepped closer. Cross pressed back against the windows. The floor, to ceiling glass overlooking the city he had been bleeding dry. "You wanted to see my scars," Diane said softly. "The map you think will save you." She reached for the hem of her tank top. Both men went still, Cross with desperate, greedy hope, Ray with something darker and more possessive flickering in his eyes. Diane pulled the fabric up slowly, exposing her stomach first, toned muscle and brown skin marked by smaller scars. The evidence of years working with unforgiving materials, higher over her ribs, past the edge of her sports bra. Until she turned her back to them, the scars were a constellation of raised tissue, deliberate and precise. They covered her shoulder blades, traced down her spine, spread across the small of her back like a topographical map carved into living canvas. Some were thick and ropey, others thin as paper cuts. All of them were intentional. Ray had seen them before in the maintenance station. But not like this, not in the harsh light of this penthouse. Not with the whole city sprawling behind her like a witness to everything she had sacrificed. Cross breathed hard, stepping forward. You really did it. You burned the information into your own skin. Thermal scarification, Diane confirmed. Done in stages over 2 months. Every tunnel, every hidden room, every structural flaw you paid me to build and then tried to bury. Cross reached out, his fingers trembling as they hovered over the largest scar. The one that ran from her left shoulder, blade to the center of her spine. I need photographs, measurements. I need. Ray's hand closed around Cross's wrist before he could make contact. The developer gasped as the pressure built. Not quite breaking bone, but promising it. You don't touch her, Ray said. His voice carried the kind of finality usually reserved for a person's very last words. But the map is a lie. The words came from Diane. They landed like stones dropped into still, dark water. Cross stared at her. What? Diane turned to face him, pulling her shirt back down. When she smiled, it was the expression of a woman who had spent 2 entire years planning this exact moment. The scars are real, she said. The pain was real, but the information. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, worn notebook. Its pages stained and soft from years of handling. The actual map is right here. The scars are misdirection. A topographical survey of the city's legal waterworks that I copied from public records. Anyone with access to the city planning office could verify every single line of it. The color drained from Cross's face as understanding hit him like a freight train. You made me believe I was chasing something real. I made you believe I was desperate enough, stupid enough to turn my own body into evidence. Diane's voice was steady and merciless. I let you hunt me. I let you send your cleaners. I let you threaten my daughter, because I needed you to reveal yourself completely. I needed you to confess. She pointed up at the small camera lens mounted inside the decorative lighting fixture above them. Something Cross's own security team had installed long before any of this began. Now recording every single word you have said tonight. Every admission, every threat. Diane's smile widened. It's all documented, and it has already been uploaded to 3 different servers, along with the real construction documents showing your fraud. Cross's legs gave out beneath him. He collapsed against the window, his expensive suit rumpled and soaked with sweat. This was a setup, all of it, Ray confirmed, from the moment Marcus was placed in protection. From the moment we knew you would eventually come for his family. We have been waiting, Daniel, building the trap around you, one piece at a time. Cross looked wildly between them. Your cleaners were allowed to find Diane exactly when we needed them to, Ray said, his voice carrying dark satisfaction. Every attack, every close call, we controlled all of it. We made you feel powerful, made you feel like you were winning. The whole time you were digging your own grave. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer by the second. Cross looked wildly from one of them to the other. You called the police. We called the federal agents, Diane corrected. Your construction fraud crosses state lines. Your bribery of federal building inspectors makes this a federal case. The police are just here to secure the scene. Ray checked his watch. You have about 4 minutes before they arrive. I'd suggest you use that time to pray. But Cross was not praying. He was staring at the window behind him. At the 50-story drop, at the final exit that didn't involve a prison cell, Diane saw the calculation in his eyes. She had seen that same look before on the faces of men who had run out of every option and decided they preferred death to consequence. Don't, she said quietly. Cross met her gaze. Why not? You've taken everything else, because you don't get to make it easy. Diane's voice was ice and iron. You don't get to jump and be remembered as some tragic figure. You're going to stand trial. You're going to hear Marcus testify against you from a very much alive witness stand. You're going to watch your entire empire burn to the ground. And you're going to live with every single bit of it. For a moment, Cross teetered right on the edge of that decision. Then his shoulders slumped, and he slid slowly down the window until he was sitting on the floor, broken. Ray turned to Diane. In his eyes, she saw something she had not expected. respect that bordered on reverence. You played him perfectly. I had a good teacher. Diane glanced at the old beat-up phone, still clutched in her hand. Marcus spent 3 years in protection, planning every single piece of this, every contingency, every angle. He always knew Cross would come for us eventually. He just needed time to build the case properly, and the scars. Diane's hand drifted to her stomach, touching the fabric that covered the marks beneath. Those are real. The pain was real. I did it because I needed to believe the lie myself. If I was going to sell it to someone else, I had to live it completely. Ray stepped closer, close enough that Diane could smell the rain still clinging to his jacket and the gunpowder residue on his hands. That's not strategy, that's sacrifice, that's survival. But her voice wavered just slightly, betraying the cost of every single choice she had made. The sirens were right outside now, multiple vehicles converging on the building. Ray touched her elbow. Barely a brush of contact, but she felt it like electricity. We need to move. They moved toward the service corridor exit, stepping over bodies and debris. Mrs. Henderson was still unconscious on the designer floor. Cross didn't even look up as they passed. In the service corridor, away from all the carnage, Diane finally let herself feel it, the exhaustion. The terror, the rage that had fueled every single moment of the past 2 years. Her hands started shaking, and she pressed them flat against the concrete wall to steady herself. Hey, Ray's voice was softer than she had ever heard it. You're safe now, it's over, is it? Diane looked at him. This man, who had walked into her nightmare and somehow become her partner in controlled destruction. Cross had connections. Marcus is still in protection, which means he is still in danger. There are people who... Marcus will be relocated permanently with full immunity, Ray said. The federal agents have been building a major case against the syndicate's business fronts for years. Cross's testimony is going to give them everything they need. Ray's jaw tightened. As for the Golden Wolf family, I'm restructuring. The old guard, the people who dealt with men like Cross, are being retired. By retired, you mean? I mean they are being given very strong encouragement to find entirely new careers. His smile was sharp. The violent ones are being handled differently. Diane studied him carefully. This man who commanded empires from the shadows, who had sacrificed pieces of his own organization to protect her family. What do you want from me, Ray? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them was quite ready to name out loud. I want, he paused. Something vulnerable flickered across his usually controlled expression. I want you to be safe. I want Lily to grow up without fear. I want Marcus to come home to his family. That's not what I asked. Ray's hand lifted, his fingers hovering near her face, not quite touching, as if asking permission. What I want is complicated. Try me. I want to trace every scar on your body and memorize the story behind each one. I want to watch you build something beautiful instead of always destroying what's ugly. I want... He stopped himself. His jaw clenched. I want things I have no right to want. Diane's breath caught. They were standing too close in the narrow corridor. The emergency lighting casting half his face in shadow. She could see the war happening in his eyes. Desire fighting with duty. Want fighting with wisdom. Maybe I want them too, she whispered. The moment stretched out between them, tight as a welding wire about to snap. Then the chime of the service elevator broke the silence. Federal agents poured into the corridor, their voices sharp with authority. Ray stepped back, the mask of the boss sliding back into place, but his eyes promised later. We finish this later. 3 weeks later, Diane stood in the ruins of Cross's glass tower and watched the demolition crews prepare to bring it down properly. The building had been evacuated, condemned, and tagged for controlled destruction. Every structural flaw she had documented was now public record. The families who had nearly moved into death traps were being relocated and compensated. The construction workers who had been pressured to cut corners were testifying, and Daniel Cross was in federal custody, his empire being systematically dismantled by prosecutors who had waited years for a case this airtight. Diane breathed in the scent of concrete dust and possibility. The late afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber, turning the skeletal framework into something almost beautiful. "You're smiling." Ray's voice came from behind her, warm and slightly amused. "That's new." She turned to find him standing at the edge of the construction zone, dressed down for once. Dark pants, a black shirt, a leather jacket. He looked younger like this, more human, though no less dangerous. "I'm watching something broken get fixed properly," Diane said. "It feels good." He walked to her side and they stood together, watching the crews work. His arm brushed hers, not quite touching, but close enough to share warmth. "The federal agents want you to consult on their infrastructure fraud task force," Ray said. "Apparently your eye for structural deception is valuable. I heard they're offering competitive salary, full benefits, and a position that does not require a formal degree." Diane's smile turned wry. Marcus would have loved the irony, his wife working for the government. Speaking of Marcus, Ray pulled out his phone and tapped it twice. "He asked if you and Lily would like to video call tonight. He's been cleared to resume limited contact now that the case is solid." Diane's hand flew to her mouth. Tears sprang instantly to her eyes. "Really, really." Ray's expression softened. "He wants to see his daughter's face." "And yours?" The emotion crashed through her all at once. Relief, joy, grief for all the years that had been stolen from them. She turned away, trying to compose herself, but a sob escaped anyway. Ray's hand settled on her shoulder. "Steady and warm. It's okay," he said quietly. "You're allowed to feel it." "I don't know how to feel it anymore." Her voice cracked. "I've been in survival mode for so long. I forgot what it's like to just be, then learn again." His hand moved from her shoulder to the small of her back, a gesture that was protective and possessive all at once. "You have time now. You have safety. Take it." Diane turned in the circle of his arm, looking up at him. The setting sun cast shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp angles, the intensity in his dark eyes. "What about you? What will you do with time and safety? I'm going legitimate." His smile was self-deprecating. "Mostly, the Golden Wolf is restructuring into private security and risk management. No more protection rackets. No more smuggling. We're cleaning house completely. That's a big change. I met a woman who turned herself into evidence to protect her daughter." Ray's voice dropped lower, intimate. "She reminded me that some things are worth the cost, the air between them charged with everything left unspoken." Diane was acutely aware of his hand on her back, the heat of his body close to hers, the way his eyes moved across her face like he was trying to memorize every detail. "Ray," she started, not sure what she even wanted to say. "I know." His thumb traced small circles against her spine. The touch sent shivers through her entire body. Too soon, too complicated. "Marcus is coming home and you need time to rebuild your life." Yes, she agreed, all of those things, but Diane reached up, her calloused fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "But I can't stop thinking about you, about us, about what might happen when the dust finally settles." His eyes darkened, desire flickering to life in their depths. "Diane," she pressed her finger to his lips. "Don't tell me all the reasons it's a bad idea. Don't talk about the complications or the consequences. Just tell me the truth. Do you want me?" The silence stretched out between them, loaded with everything. Then Ray's hand came up to cradle her face, his touch reverent despite the roughness of his palm. "I've wanted you since I watched you turn your workshop into a war zone," he said, his voice raw and honest. "I've wanted you every single moment since, but I won't take advantage of." She kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't soft. It was 2 years of survival and fear and fighting transmuted into something that felt like pure connection. Her hands gripped his jacket. His arms wrapped around her with bruising intensity. They broke apart, gasping. Foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air. Ray started, a mistake. Diane's heart hammered against her ribs. "Perfect." He kissed her again, softer this time, savoring, terrifying and perfect. Diane laughed against his mouth. The sound shaky with emotion and something that felt dangerously like joy. We're a mess. We're warriors who survived a war. Ray traced her lower lip with his thumb. Give yourself permission to want something good, even if that good thing is a reformed crime boss with more enemies than allies. Especially then. They stood wrapped in each other as the sun set behind the glass tower, turning the city into a watercolor painting of orange and purple. Eventually, they would have to face the complications. Marcus's return, the rebuilding of their lives, the slow, careful work of learning to trust in safety again. But for now, in this moment, Diane let herself feel wanted. Cherished, protected, she let herself feel. The controlled demolition of the glass tower was scheduled for dawn. Exactly 6 months after Cross's arrest, Diane stood on the observation platform with Lily beside her, both of them wearing safety gear and holding noise, canceling headphones. Behind them, a crowd had gathered. Journalists, city officials, families who had nearly moved into condemned buildings, construction workers who had blown the whistle. And Ray, standing close enough that his presence was a steady, constant comfort. You ready? He asked Diane quietly. She nodded, squeezing Lily's hand. Her daughter had been through so much, but she was resilient, already back in school, already laughing again, already asking when she could go visit Daddy. Tonight, they would video call Marcus properly. Lily, able to see and hear her father without fear. The thought made Diane's throat tight with emotion. Mama, will it be loud? Lily asked, looking up with wide, serious eyes. Very loud, baby. Diane knelt to her level. But we're safe here, and when it comes down, we'll know that all the bad things Cross did are coming down with it. Lily considered this with a child's perfect gravity. Good. Buildings should be safe. Yes, they should. Diane kissed her forehead. The demolition crew chief's voice crackled over the loudspeaker, counting down. 30 seconds, 20, 10. Diane slipped the headphones over Lily's ears, then her own. Ray moved to stand directly behind them, his hands coming to rest on Diane's shoulders. An anchor, a promise. The first explosives detonated. The glass tower shuddered, concrete cracking with sounds like thunder trapped inside stone. The charges were precisely placed, exactly calculated to bring the structure down without touching a single surrounding building. It was beautiful in its precision, destruction as art, physics as poetry. The building folded into itself, floor by floor, disappearing into a massive cloud of dust and debris. The sound was overwhelming even through the noise, canceling headphones, a roar that Diane felt deep in her bones. 30 seconds. That was all it took to erase Cross's monument to greed. When the dust began to settle, Lily pulled off her headphones. Wow, yeah, Diane agreed, her voice rough with emotion. Wow. She felt Ray's hands tighten slightly on her shoulders. Then release when she turned. She found him watching her with an expression she was beginning to recognize. Pride mixed with desire, respect tangled with want. Come on, he said. I have something to show you both. They followed him to his car, a sleek black sedan that drove like a dream. He navigated through the city streets with the easy confidence of someone who knew every shortcut and every hidden route by heart. Where are we going? Lily asked from the back seat, her nose pressed flat against the window. Somewhere special, Ray said, meeting Diane's eyes briefly. Somewhere your mama built. Diane's brow furrowed in confusion. But she trusted him. That alone was remarkable. She trusted him. They drove for 20 minutes, eventually pulling up to a newly constructed community center in a neighborhood Diane recognized immediately. She had welded the support structures here 3 years ago, back when Cross was still pretending to care about civic projects. This was supposed to be luxury condos, she said, stepping out of the car. It was, Ray said, opening the door for Lily and helping her out. Until someone anonymously purchased the property and donated it to the city for community use. The renovation was just completed last week. He led them to the entrance where a small plaque was mounted beside the door. Diane's breath caught as she read it. Marcus Brooks Community Center, in honor of a union worker who stood for safety and integrity. Tears blurred her vision. Marcus worked on this building, Ray said gently. He was the one who first reported the structural problems to Cross. When Cross tried to bribe him, Marcus refused. When Cross threatened him, Marcus gathered evidence. This center stands because of him. Did you do this? Diane whispered. The Golden Wolf purchased the property. But the donation was anonymous, and the renovation funds came from several different sources, including the settlement money from families Cross had defrauded. Ray opened the door. Come inside. The interior took Diane's breath away completely. The space was beautiful. High ceilings, natural light pouring in from every angle, open rooms designed for classes and community gatherings. And on the walls were her sculptures, the kinetic art pieces she had believed were burned to ash the night of the workshop fire. Steel and copper moving gently with the air currents. How? She breathed, touching one of the smaller pieces. I had my people salvage what they could the night of the attack, Ray admitted quietly. I couldn't save your workshop, but I could save your art. Lily ran ahead, exploring the space with the boundless energy of a 7-year-old who had been through the darkness and found light waiting on the other side. Her laughter echoed through the center, pure and bright. Diane turned to Ray, overwhelmed. Why do all of this? He stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her face. Because you deserved better than just survival. You deserve triumph. This is too much. No. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. It's not enough. It will never be enough to balance what you and Marcus sacrificed. Diane leaned into his touch, letting herself feel the full weight of his regard. I don't know how to thank you. Don't. Ray's voice was rough. Don't thank me for doing the bare minimum of being decent. That's not what this is. Diane placed her hand over his, holding it against her face. This is extraordinary. They stood like that, caught in a moment of complete understanding, until Lily's voice called from the other room. Mama, there's a room with my name on it. Diane pulled back, confusion and hope fighting in her chest. What? Ray smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. Come see. They followed Lily to a smaller room off the main hall. Above the door, a hand-painted sign read Lily's creative space. Inside was every tool and material a young inventor could dream of. A safe welding station, a robotics kit, drawing supplies, building materials everywhere. The walls were covered in inspiration. Photos of female engineers and inventors, blueprints of famous structures, quotes about creativity and courage. Lily spun in the center of the room, her eyes enormous. Is this really mine? It's yours, Ray confirmed. For you and any other kids who want to learn to build and create. Your mama is going to teach classes here. Diane stared at him. I am, if you want to. His expression softened. This city needs people like you. People who understand that structures should be safe. That building something isn't just about making a profit. Marcus wanted this, a place where his daughter could grow up surrounded by possibilities instead of fear. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. Diane pressed her hands to her face, trying to hold back the sobs. They came anyway, 2 years of terror and grief and rage, finally transmuting into something gentler. Ray's arms came around her immediately, pulling her against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong. An anchor in the storm of everything she was feeling. Let it out, he murmured against her hair. You're safe. She's safe, let it out, so she did. She cried for Marcus, for all the years they had lost together. For the fear Lily had carried. She cried for the woman she had been before all of this, and for the warrior she had been forced to become. She cried until the tears ran completely dry, and she was left shaking and exhausted in Ray's arms. When she finally pulled back, Lily was standing in the doorway with a box of tissues. Her small face completely serious and somehow understanding beyond her years. It's okay to cry, Mama. Lily said softly. Daddy used to say crying is just your heart cleaning itself. Diane laughed through the very last of her tears, pulling her daughter close. He did say that, didn't he? Yeah. Lily snuggled against her. I miss him. Me too, baby. Me too. Ray watched them. And Diane saw something shift in his expression. A wall coming down. A decision being made. He's waiting, Ray said quietly. Marcus is on video call right now. If you're ready. Diane's head snapped up. Now. Ray pulled out a tablet from a messenger bag. He wanted to be here for this, to see the center, to see you. With shaking hands, Diane took the tablet. The screen showed a video feed, and there he was, Marcus, older, thinner, more gray in his hair and more lines around his eyes. But alive, whole, real. Diane, he breathed, his voice cracking. Marcus. Her voice was barely a whisper. Lily scrambled onto her lap and pressed her face close to the screen. Daddy, I learned how to hotwire a truck. Marcus laughed, the sound watery with emotion. That's my girl. I always knew you'd be a genius. They talked for an hour, reconnecting piece by piece. Marcus told them about witness protection, about the federal case, about the plans for his eventual return. Diane told him about the center, about Lily's bravery, about the justice they had won together. And Ray stood apart the whole time, giving them space. His face unreadable, but his eyes betraying the depth of everything he felt. When the call finally ended with promises to talk again tomorrow, Diane handed the tablet back to Ray with hands that felt lighter than they had in years. Thank you, she said simply, for all of it. He nodded, something complicated moving across his face. Diane, there's something you should know about Marcus and me. Her stomach clenched. What? We weren't just friends. We were brothers, not by blood, by choice. When we were 17, he saved my life during a street fight. I have owed him everything ever since. Ray's jaw worked. When Cross put the order out, I had to make a choice. Let Marcus die or fake his death, and look weak in front of the entire organization. I chose him, and it cost me. I tried to move you and Lily into protection that same night, but you had already vanished by the time my people reached the house. I have spent 3 years looking for you. Cost you how? My position, my reputation, the trust of my people. Half my organization thinks I'm getting soft. His smile was bitter. They're right, I am getting soft. Because of him, because of you, because of what you've reminded me, that some things are worth more than power. Diane reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Tell that to the people I've had to remove from the organization because they disagreed. You did what had to be done to protect the people you love. Diane squeezed his hand. That's not something to apologize for. Ray looked down at their joined hands, his thumb tracing slow patterns on her scarred knuckles. I'm falling in love with you, he said quietly. I know it's too soon, I know it's complicated, but I need you to know I'm falling and I can't stop. Diane's breath caught in her chest. Every rational part of her brain screamed that it was too fast, too intense, too much all at once. But her heart, her weary battle, scarred heart, recognized truth when it heard it. I know, she whispered. I'm falling too, he looked up, hope and fear fighting for control of his expression. What do we do about it? We take it slow, we figure it out. Diane stepped closer until they were breathing the same air. We give Marcus time to come home and heal. We give Lily time to adjust. We give ourselves permission to want this without rushing anything. I can do slow. Ray's hand came up to cradle her face. I've waited my whole life for something real. I can wait a little longer. Who says you have to wait? Diane rose onto her toes and pressed her lips to his in a kiss that tasted of promise and possibility. 6 months later, Diane stood on the balcony of her new workshop and watched the city lights flicker to life across the skyline. The workshop was a gift from the Golden Wolf, a legitimate gift, fully documented and taxed and completely legal. It occupied the entire ground floor of a newly renovated warehouse in the Arts District with high ceilings, proper ventilation, and more than enough space for her largest kinetic sculptures. Above the workshop were living quarters, a loft apartment that she and Lily now called home. It was smaller than the old building, but it was theirs, and it was safe, and 3 floors up, occupying the entire top level, was Ray's private office for his new venture, Golden Lotus Security and Risk Management. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Mama, Uncle Ray says dinner's ready. Lily's voice called from inside, Uncle Ray. It had taken 3 months for Lily to start using the title. But once she had, it stuck completely. Ray wore it with a pride that made Diane's heart ache in the very best way. She found them in the kitchen. Ray at the stove, still wearing his dress shirt and work pants, but with an apron tied around his waist, and Lily setting the table with exaggerated, extremely serious care. "Smells amazing," Diane said, leaning against the counter. "It's a barbecue." Ray glanced over his shoulder, his eyes warming when they found her. "I figured we should celebrate." "Celebrate what? Daddy's coming home," Lily announced, practically bouncing right off the floor. "Tomorrow, for real this time." Diane's hand flew to her mouth. "What?" Ray turned, wiping his hands on a towel. "The federal agents called an hour ago. The trial is over. Cross has been sentenced, and all the criminal connections have been officially severed. Marcus is being released from protection tomorrow afternoon." The tears came instantly, hot and overwhelming. Diane pressed her hands to her face, trying to breathe through the surge of emotion. Ray crossed to her immediately, pulling her into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, inhaling the familiar scent of him. "It's over," she whispered against his shirt. "It's really over. It's over," he confirmed, his lips brushing her temple. "You won. You all won." They stood like that until Lily tugged insistently on Diane's hand. "Mama, don't cry. Happy things are happening." Diane laughed through her tears and scooped her daughter up. "You're right, baby. Happy things are happening." Dinner was chaos and laughter, and planning all at once. They talked about where Marcus would stay initially. Ray had arranged a short-term apartment right in the same building. They talked about how the transition would work. Marcus would need time to readjust, to reconnect with Lily, to figure out who he was outside of hiding, and Diane would need time to figure out what shape her new life would take now that the man she had mourned was coming home. After dinner, Lily fell asleep on the couch during a movie. Ray carried her to bed with the practiced ease of someone who had done it many times before. He tucked her in and kissed her forehead. When he came back out, Diane was on the balcony again, looking out at the city that had nearly destroyed her, and that she had helped rebuild. Ray joined her, standing close but not touching. "You okay?" "I'm terrified," Diane admitted. "What if Marcus and I can't figure out how to be married again? What if too much has changed? What if you give yourself permission to feel whatever you feel?" Ray interrupted gently. "Marcus knows what you went through. He knows you're not the same woman he left, and he's not the same man either. And us." Diane turned to face him. "What happens to us?" The question had been unspoken for months, hovering between them. They had been careful. Stolen kisses, long, honest conversations, hands that found each other in crowded rooms, but they had kept their boundaries, respected the complexity of everything around them. "That's up to you," Ray said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere. Whether you need me as a friend, a partner, or just someone who cares deeply about your family. Love isn't about being fair." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair gently behind her ear. "It's about showing up, and I'll keep showing up, Diane. However you need me." Diane's throat tightened. "I don't deserve you. You deserve everything." His hand lingered near her face. "And I'm selfish enough to want to be the one who gives it to you." She leaned into his touch, letting herself feel the full weight of what existed between them. Desire and respect, passion and partnership. They had built something in the wreckage of her old life, something strong enough to withstand whatever came next. "When Marcus comes home," she said slowly, "I need to take time to figure out what our marriage looks like now. To give Lily the stability she needs. I understand, but I don't want to lose this." Diane gestured between them. "I don't want to lose you. You won't." Ray's smile was soft and genuine. "I told you I'm not going anywhere. Even if it takes months, years, even then." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "You're worth waiting for. You've always been worth waiting for." They stood together like that under the stars, holding each other in the quiet knowledge that some things simply could not be rushed. Some connections could not be forced. Real love, when it was truly real, always knew how to wait. The next day, Diane and Lily stood in the arrival area of a private airfield, watching a small plane taxi to a stop. Lily gripped Diane's hand so tightly it hurt, her whole body vibrating with anticipation. When the plane door opened and Marcus appeared at the top of the stairs, Lily screamed his name and took off running. Marcus dropped his bag and caught his daughter, spinning her around as they both cried and laughed at the same time. Diane watched, her heart expanding and breaking and healing all at the same time. When Marcus finally looked up and met her eyes across the tarmac, she saw everything they had lost and everything they might still find, written all across his expression. She walked to them slowly, giving herself time to absorb the reality. Her husband was home. Her family was whole. The nightmare was over. "Hi," she said when she reached them, her voice unsteady. "Hi," Marcus replied. His voice was just as broken. They stared at each other over Lily's head. Two people who had loved each other once, who had built a life together, who had been torn apart and forced to survive separately. "We have a lot to talk about," Diane said finally. "Yeah," Marcus shifted Lily in his arms. "We do, but not today." Diane reached out and touched his arm. "The first physical contact in 3 years. Today you're home, and that's enough." Marcus's eyes shone with tears. "Thank you for protecting her, for being so strong. I wasn't alone." Diane glanced back toward the car where Ray waited, giving them their space. There were people who helped. Marcus followed her gaze. Understanding flickered quietly across his face. "Ray told me about everything, about how much you've all been through together." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I hope that's okay, Diane." Marcus's voice was firm. "You survived. You protected our daughter. You brought down Cross and exposed everything. However you did that, whoever helped you, I'm grateful." Lily tugged on his shirt. "Daddy, you have to meet my room and my workshop. And Uncle Ray makes really good food." Marcus laughed, kissing the top of her head. "Uncle Ray, huh? He's really cool," Lily said very seriously. "And he's teaching me about physics and engineering, and how to throw a punch properly in case bad men ever come back." "That's..." Marcus looked to Diane for help. She shrugged, fighting a smile. "Our daughter is a warrior princess now." "Deal with it. A warrior princess." Marcus shook his head, wonder filling his voice. "Of course she is." "She's your daughter." They drove back to the warehouse together. Marcus, Diane, and Lily in the back of Ray's car, with Ray driving and giving them the space to reconnect. The conversation was awkward at first, halting, but by the time they reached the building, some of the old ease had started coming back. Marcus's apartment was ready, modest but comfortable, with a view of the city and close enough to Diane's workshop that Lily could run easily between both homes. As they helped him settle in, Diane felt the weight of the past 3 years finally begin to truly lift. They weren't the same people anymore. They might never be those people again, but they were here, they were alive. And they had the chance to build something new from the wreckage of the old. That was enough. That was everything. That night, after Lily was asleep and Marcus was settled in his apartment, Diane found Ray on the roof of the building. He had turned it into a garden, green plants and comfortable seating, a space for thinking and breathing and healing slowly. "Hey," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. He turned, his face softening immediately when he saw her. "Hey yourself. How's Marcus?" Overwhelmed, grateful, processing. Diane sat beside him on the bench, their shoulders touching. "He wants to thank you properly for everything. He doesn't need to thank me. I owed him. You owed him his life. You gave him his whole family back." Diane turned to face him fully. "That's more than any debt ever required." Ray was quiet for a moment, his eyes searching her face. "Are you okay, really?" "I don't know," Diane admitted. "I love Marcus, I always will, but I'm not the woman he married, and he's not the man I married. We have to figure out if we can still be those people to each other." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together, "And if we can't, then we figure out how to raise Lily together and be friends and build new lives." She paused, gathering everything she had left. "But whatever happens, I need you to know something." "What's that?" "You changed my life, you saved my life, and She stopped, then started again. "I love you. Maybe not in the same way I loved Marcus." Maybe not in a way that makes perfect sense right now, but I love you, and that is not going to change regardless of what happens with my marriage." Ray's hand tightened around hers. "Diane, you don't have to." She pressed her finger to his lips. "I just needed you to know. Because you deserve to be loved, Ray, fully and fiercely and without reservation." He gently moved her finger away. His eyes intense. "I love you too. God help me. I love you too." They sat together under the stars, holding hands like two people who had found something real and were determined not to let go of it, letting the complexity of their situation exist without trying to force it into something simpler. Some things couldn't be solved. They could only be lived through, day by day, choice by choice. Below them, the city sparkled with possibility. And in that moment, sitting with a man who had walked through fire for her, with her daughter safe and her husband home, Diane finally understood what Marcus had meant all those years ago when he talked about building things that lasted. She had built a fortress, but more than that, she had built a family. Not the traditional kind, not the simple kind, but the kind that survives wars and comes out stronger on the other side. And that, she thought, as Ray's thumb traced slow circles on her palm, was worth every single scar. 3 years later, the Marcus Brooks Community Center was hosting its annual showcase. The building buzzed with energy and creativity. Diane stood near the main exhibition, watching 10-year-old Lily demonstrate her latest invention, a robotic arm designed to assist with precision welding. The crowd around her daughter was thick with impressed parents, potential investors, and journalists documenting the young prodigy. "She's incredible," Marcus said, appearing quietly at Diane's side. "She's terrifying," Diane corrected, smiling. "Last week, she asked me to teach her about controlled demolitions." Marcus laughed. "That's definitely your daughter." They stood together comfortably, the way two people who had worked very hard to remain good friends after a marriage ended stood. Their marriage had lasted another year after his return, before they had both finally admitted what they had known deep down for a long time. They loved each other, but they were not in love anymore. Too much had changed. They had become different people who wanted different lives. The divorce had been peaceful, the arrangements flexible. Marcus had moved into his own place 2 blocks away, close enough to be a real presence in Lily's life, far enough to build his own future, and Diane had taken her own leap. Strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind. She leaned back into the familiar embrace without even thinking. Ray's chin rested on her shoulder, his breath warm against her neck. "Your daughter is holding court like she already runs the company," he murmured. "She learned from the best." Diane tilted her head to look at him. "You taught her how to command a room." "I taught her confidence. You taught her substance." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "That combination is completely unstoppable." Marcus watched them with an expression that was equal parts gratitude and wistfulness. "Take care of them," he said quietly to Ray. "Always," Ray replied, and the promise in his voice was absolute. Marcus nodded once, then moved toward the crowd where his girlfriend, a kind forensic accountant he had met through the federal case, was waiting for him. Diane and Ray stood together, watching the community they had helped build thrive around them. Golden Lotus Security had become a powerhouse in the private sector. Diane's consulting work had made her one of the most sought after structural engineers in the entire region, and together they had created something that went far beyond their individual success. They had created family. Chosen and fierce. "Hey," Ray said softly, "there's something I want to show you." He led her to a quiet corner where a new sculpture had been installed. One of hers, a kinetic piece called Phoenix Rising, steel and copper and glass, and when the light hit it exactly right, it seemed to burn with its own inner fire. Beside it was a small plaque she had never seen before, for Diane Brooks, who taught me that some things are worth burning for, and some loves are worth building on. Diane's breath caught. Ray dropped to one knee, pulling a simple platinum band from his pocket. "I know we've done this backwards," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion filling his eyes. "We fell in love in the middle of a war. We built a life in the aftermath. And we took our time figuring out what we truly wanted. But I know now with complete and absolute certainty that what I want is you. Every scar, every strength, every complicated, beautiful piece of your life. Will you marry me? Diane's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming freely down her face. Across the room, Lily had stopped her entire demonstration and was watching with the biggest, most hopeful eyes Diane had ever seen. Yes, Diane whispered, yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Ray slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that tasted of promise and future, and everything they had both fought so hard to reach. The crowd around them erupted in applause, but Diane barely heard it. All she heard was her own heartbeat, strong and steady and alive. And in that moment, standing in the community center named for her first love, being proposed to by the man who had helped her survive the worst and celebrate the very best, Diane finally understood what it truly meant to be home, not a place, not a building, but the people who choose to stand with you when the whole world tries to tear you apart. That was home, that was family, that was love,